welcome to today's Facebook Live session. We're going to be looking at the impact of menopause on family relationships and how our symptoms can cause many of us to leave our jobs, which in turn can cause enormous financial pressures and sadly often tension and arguments between partners. So my guest today is family lawyer Helen Young from Debenhams Ottaway. Thanks for joining me, Helen.
Thank you, Katie.
Now, before we begin, I thought I'd just give everyone a little bit of information about you. So Helen has over 30 years experience in family law, helping individuals and families in Hertfordshire, London, and across the UK on all aspects of divorce and separation. She's one of the most sought after divorce lawyers in the region and is recognised as a top tier family lawyer in the leading legal directories. Helen also specialises in divorce and separation and regularly advises on complex, high-value financial settlements, often involving family businesses and assets held abroad. She helps her clients reach a fair settlement and does everything that she can to make the process as amicable and painless as possible for them. And she also helps clients with pre- and post-nuptial agreements, living together agreements, and disputes involving children. Now, a lot of Helen's work comes from very satisfied clients who recommend her to family and friends, and clients like her understanding and supportive approach and her ability to help them move forward with their lives. And she has a reputation for transparency in the way she works and treats clients. She's leading Debenhams Ottaway's campaign at the moment, actually, to raise awareness of the impact of the menopause on relationships at home and in the workplace, and wants to help educate divorcing, separating women who are going through the menopause on what options and legal support are available. So Helen, again, thank you for coming in today. And I know from personal experience how debilitating undiagnosed peri or menopausal symptoms can be. I left my own job because of them, and that put a lot of pressure on many of my own relationships at home and in the workplace. Now, I know that you've had some personal experience too, so I wonder if you wouldn't mind, first of all, let's start by sharing your own story with us.
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to do that. I think the menopause for me really sort of crept up on me. So it's something that I think is easy to see what was happening with hindsight, but at the time and when you're in the moment, you're not really sure what's happening and why it is. So I was in my sort of mid to late 40s and started suffering with, sort of low mood generally, anxiety, and nothing that I could really put my finger on. Just feeling, quite low, and also having sort of thoughts about mortality and things like that. Things that, of course I've thought about in the past, but were not at the forefront of my mind. But, I got on with life. And I think it was only really when the physical symptoms came to me that I really began to realize that I was going through, perimenopause and menopause. I started suffering from night sweats, and I was waking up probably every 90 minutes in the night. I was wet from head to foot. And so my sleep pattern was just all over the place. And to try and deal with that and hold down a full-time job, it was just so hard. I was having hot flushes at work. So you'll appreciate I'm a family lawyer. I talk to people about very intimate details of their life. And I was talking to people and all of a sudden I would sort of go red all the way up my face, extremely red. And I was worried they thought that I was embarrassed about the topics we were talking about. And of course I wasn't, but it's really difficult when you've just met somebody to be able to say to them, oh, I'm sorry, I'm menopausal, I'm having a hot flush. So I was finding that really, really difficult. I spoke to my mum, who was alive at that point, bless her, and she told me about her experiences. But she also told me and reminded me really that she'd suffered from DVTs during her lifetime. And in fact, had been hospitalized on a couple of occasions. And I remember one time, my 8th or 9th birthday, I think it was, she was in the hospital, so she wasn't home for my birthday. And I still remember that as being, just the fact that mum wasn't there. So I was really worried about what help might be available, but I knew I needed to have help because I was really getting to the stage where it was difficult to cope with everything. You can't exist without sleep. I had a couple of visits to the doctor. The first one, not so good. Didn't really feel that I was being properly listened to and so on. And then I went back again and I saw a lovely woman GP. She spent twice or three times the time that she should have spent, for the allocated appointment. She really listened to me. She listened to all my concerns. And in the end, I was prescribed with HRT patches, which for me were sort of life-changing. I don't want to be too dramatic, but just the change from not having all of that to deal with, it was just such a revelation to me. And so all of that just led me to think about how my clients might have been impacted by that. And that obviously I was aware of menopause, but not until I went through it myself did I realize quite how debilitating it was and how it just filters into everything.
Absolutely. And I'm obviously so sorry that you went through it, but in some ways, I'm quite glad because that gives you then the perspective when you're dealing with your own clients of what they may possibly be going through. And for those that don't know, the relevance of DVT is that there is when women are prescribed HRT in a pill form, there is a slight increased risk of a clot. So most doctors nowadays do prefer, where possible, to offer transdermal HRT, which is absorbed through the skin, either in a patch or a gel. Or a spray. And whilst we're on that topic, first of all, it's one thing even getting the right diagnosis. So, you've done obviously very well yourself to have such an understanding GP who's spent that time with you. But even when you do get the right treatment options for you, which for you and for myself was HRT, with the shortages going on at the moment, and everybody desperately trying to get hold of estrogel in particular, or finding alternatives, that's just layering on another level of anxiety on top of of issues that are going on already, and women are terrified of their symptoms coming back. So that you've mentioned about the impact it had on you at work. So when you have clients that come to you, perhaps they're thinking about separation and divorce, what sort of issues are they talking to you about where you perhaps think that their menopause symptoms could be at play here?
Well, sometimes it's obvious. I have had women come to me who reference their own menopause journey, people who have had to give up work. I had one lady recently who'd had a very high-powered job, had her children sort of later on in life, and so was juggling a job with travel, 2 kids. I think one was teenage and one was just approaching teenage, a husband that she described as unsupportive, and she'd reached the stage where she actually had to leave her job. She just felt that everything was too much for her, and she just couldn't continue. So that was easier to deal with in the sense that she knew what it was and she'd recognized it. I think the more difficult conversations are when people come in and you can clearly see that they're in emotional difficulty. It may be their first time seeing me. So part of that first meeting is to build a relationship, to try and build trust, because trust is something that you probably need in your relationship with your family solicitor, more than you would need it with your conveyancing solicitor, because you'll talk about very intimate and personal matters as a necessary part of the planning about what you're going to do and where you hope to end up. And so I will be quite, I suppose blunt's not the right word, but if I feel that somebody perhaps is having issues around menopause, but perhaps isn't recognizing that that's it, I would suggest it to them. I'd say, well, have you thought it might be this? It's not for me to tell them what to do and go off and see your GP. But it is something that I think I'm ultimately being helpful to see if I can recognize it, and just saying, well, why do you think that you're doing this, and why do you feel that way, and trying to really pinpoint what the catalyst has been for them to seek advice.
Yeah. I mean, do some women perhaps get offended? Because obviously you always have to be a bit careful. It's like when we were young, when we were younger, and that sort of, I know my husband would always say, oh, you're on your period. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And, I think some people, when they don't recognize that especially the psychological symptoms are to do with it, they sort of, can be quite touchy. I mean, have you come across that? And obviously, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I've not had anybody who's taken offence. As I say, you do have to tread carefully.
Yeah.
And I think maybe just plant the seed rather than saying, oh, well, in my view, because, I'm not a medical person. What do I know? I just have my own experience.
Yeah.
I suppose it also has an effect on conversations I have with men. I can get men coming to see me and saying, oh my goodness, my wife has changed so much. She's become very introverted. She won't communicate. I've asked her about what the problem might be, but I'm getting the cold shoulder. She's not interested in me, in our intimate relationship. Sex life has decreased. And again, you do think to yourself, well, is the menopause a factor in this? And again, just planting the idea, it could be, and just trying to explain perhaps a little bit about it, because, as women, I think we inform ourselves about what's going on and what to expect. But I think with men, just less likely to be as informed as we are.
Look, I think it's so important to include men in the conversation. I know, my own husband, he felt like he just didn't recognize me. It was sort of like a personality transplant. A lot of women go from being very sort of, capable and vivacious and outgoing and enthusiastic. And then suddenly, you can become a shell of a woman and very teary, and sort of it's almost like the joy's been sucked out of your life and you're not able to cope with everyday tasks. And I think men are often, they just want to fix things and come up with solutions. And I think it's so important that that we inform and educate and include men in this conversation. Now, again, I know from personal sort of experience that women can often make some very, very drastic life changes. I remember thinking, oh, well, maybe I think we should move house, and sort of it was just completely random. I didn't need to. And I've heard women who just quit their jobs, and I'm going traveling, and or I'm leaving my husband, I've had enough of him. And it's like, well, hang on, you were fine, I never knew there was any problems with you. So what advice and strategies would you give to people before they consider making or taking any drastic decisions or making any changes in their lives?
Yeah, it is very difficult, when you get somebody who comes in and says, right, I've had enough, I'm off on my world cruise or whatever it might be. So I just ask people to think really carefully about what they're doing and what the implications are going to be. I'll ask them to talk to family and friends, ask them if family and friends have noticed a difference, and if so, what they think. Sometimes I have actually said to women clients, I think you're not in the right emotional headspace to be making these decisions. I think as a lawyer, I have to be honest. And I've had women sitting in front of me that I don't think are capable of making decisions. I think that they're, got a lot of things on their plate. They're clearly not coping with them. And we have to do a lot of work if you are going to separate, to make sure that you go out of the other side of it in the best possible way and feeling that you have made the right choices. So I think my sort of message to myself is never be afraid of suggesting it as an option, which is, why don't you go away, touch base with friends? Maybe if you are feeling very emotional, think about, counseling for yourself or family therapy. There is the GP route. Perhaps, join a support group. It is one of the most useful things to have, is to have a group that may not know you, that's non-judgmental, that is purely there to support, because whatever your decisions ultimately end up being, you are going to need an awful lot of support getting through this. And sometimes, and I know this from my own experience, you feel more comfortable talking to somebody that doesn't know you, because you can be absolutely open and honest with them, and they don't come with the baggage of your previous relationship with them. And I found that in life. And so I think that anything you can do to get support from others is to be encouraged.
Absolutely. And that was the whole purpose of setting up this Facebook group. It was based on my own personal experience, and I thought I was going mad, and it was just me. And I think what was so astounding for me is that when we originally started the group, that night we had 1,000 members join in 24 hours. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this is a huge problem. And I think, what's lovely is it is obviously it's a closed group, it's for women only, and everybody is talking about their own experiences and sort of supporting each other and saying, well, maybe before you do this, do X, Y, and Z. And what do you do? I want to sort of talk a little bit actually about what sort of Debenhams Ottaway are doing themselves internally. But before I get to that, what happens if after raising awareness of all these issues, couples are still really intent on moving forward with a divorce or separation? And what advice would you give to them to make that split, I guess, as stress-free as possible?
Yeah, well, I always encourage people to try and keep communicating with each other. Obviously, it's in a different way and to achieve a different outcome. But I invariably find that the cases that go to court, that couple will ultimately not have as good a relationship as those who try to find ways to negotiate their exit from the relationship. And so when I talk about that, I have in mind mediation. So I'll often talk to people about mediation, whether they are prepared to sit down with a neutral third party to talk about all the issues around the children and the house and the finances and the pensions and who's going to achieve, who's going to have what. There are no winners and losers in my work. If you succeed in a court case, what does success look like? Because you may get, the monetary amount that you were hoping for or somewhere approaching it, but it often damages your ongoing relationship with your other half. And of course, you're not going to be married anymore, but you're often going to be parents together, and you need to try and ensure that you nurture that parenting relationship, because whatever happens, it's likely that you're going to have that ongoing communication for some years to come. So mediation is certainly something I'll talk to clients about. I deal with cases on a collaborative basis. And in a collaborative case, both parties agree that they don't want to go to court. They don't want to get involved in any contested process. So they actually sign something that's called a participation agreement. And in that agreement, they agree not to go to court. And if they can't settle their differences, then the solicitors that they've been dealing with up to that point have to step away, and then they have to go ahead with other solicitors. So it's quite a powerful tool, if you like, because you invest an awful lot of time and emotional effort in working through all of the problems. And if you get to a sticking point and it means we might have to go to court, you have to think about the full implications of not that, for yourself, for your legal team. So that's a process that I'm very keen on. But whichever process you follow, we always try to be amicable. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes people lie, they hide assets, they transfer property to Uncle Jim or something, thinking that we won't find it. So there are some occasions where we just have to follow a court process, but we'll always explore the other options first, because it's really important that you get people to the end of the process as intact and as undamaged as possible. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I find most often is that people are quite scared, very fearful for the future. And sometimes that fear and insecurity can manifest itself as being quite pushy or aggressive or something like that. And so you really just have to think very carefully about what's motivating these emotions. And if we're in the collaborative process, we'll actually talk about those things. We'll say, do you think that this is coming from a place of anxiety or concern? And we'll try and explore that, because mostly we'll come out of the other end. People will be accommodated. The children will be cared for. There'll be enough money to pay for, the bills and your food and everything. But it is just the fear factor, and just trying to make sure that people understand where their emotions are coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And the law has changed now, hasn't it? The no-fault divorce. That's can you just quickly explain just what that means and sort of why that's relevant now to how things used to be?
Well, it's big. It's massive for us. As you said at the beginning, I've been in legal work for over 30 years, and for 30 years I've dealt with the same piece of divorce legislation, which is around alleging fault, adultery or unreasonable behaviour, or if you don't bring a fault-based petition, having to wait for 2 years if the other person agrees to divorce, or waiting 5 years if the other person doesn't. So we've worked with that since 1973, although I hasten to add, I haven't worked with it since 1973. So 3 weeks ago, on the 6th of April, so yes, just 3 weeks ago, we had the new legislation come into force. And basically what it's done, it's taken those fault-based petitions out of the system. So there's no unreasonable behaviour, there's no adultery. I don't have to spend time with clients explaining why they have to say things about the personal relationship that they had with their spouse or civil partner. It's hugely helpful for us not to have to start on the back foot, really, because when you were having that initial conversation with a client, you had to tell them all about this, and people were aghast by the fact that they had to give this level of detail in court documents. But now, basically, we have to say the marriage is broken down, and you issue a petition. It's all online, although there is a way of doing it by post if online isn't possible. But essentially, it's an online process. You say the marriage is broken down. You don't have to give any reasons at all. And then you have a waiting period of 20 weeks. And then you can apply for what used to be the decree nisi and the decree absolute, now called conditional orders and final orders. And so the only way that a divorce petition can be challenged is if there's a jurisdictional issue. So if somebody's saying the courts in England and Wales don't have the power to deal with it, or if there's an issue such as the validity of the marriage to start with. So very limited ways. And for the first time ever, it can be a joint application. So either one spouse or civil partner can apply, or they can apply together. And having conversations with clients who are starting on this, or perhaps have been waiting for this new legislation, because there's quite a few people been waiting for it to come in. That joint application is really quite powerful. And especially if you want to give a message, say, to your children, which is, our relationship is broken down, but we're absolutely committed to our parental role. And look, we're applying for this together. You can see we're on the same page, and we'll continue to be on the same page for you. So I'm absolutely delighted. And I do know, because I went on to the HMCTS, they had a webinar about 6 days after the new law came into force, and they'd had double the applications that they would normally have. They'd had about 3,000 in the first 6 days, because clearly people had been waiting and wanted to be able to do it in this way. So really good news, and not before time, I have to say.
Yeah, I think it's much more humane, isn't it? There's enough stress involved without having to sort of pick each other apart and find a reason. I mean, look, that's great news. And you know, when women are, partners are coming to you and saying that it's really affecting, you know, them in the workplace, and I assume you sort of say to them, or see if you can sort of find some support, menopause at work. We do a lot of we help a lot of organizations writing policies and organize awareness events, because I always say that menopause education, it needs to start with breaking down those taboos, having these conversations very openly, and having, you know, things like menopause champions in place, so that, you know, if women are really struggling, they've got someone that they can speak to and say, look, I need to get some time off work to kind of deal with this and find out what's going on and get some treatment options. And I think what are you, as an organization, for Debenhams Ottaway, for example, you said you're leading the way yourself. What are you doing internally to address these issues?
Yes, so it's obviously something that we have recognized. So yes, we've put a policy in place, which is a starting point. We've had training, you know, across the firm, and really try to encourage people to be part of that. And I'm one of the 6 menopause champions within the firm, and we've had individual training, just recognizing that it's really important to be able to offer that support, and to be able to hopefully encourage people to feel secure in coming to talk to one of us, or, you know, emailing one of us on the champion's email to say, you know, can I speak to one of you, or, you know, and it doesn't have to be in the office. We can go out for coffee, we can, you know, go out for a little walk or something like that, just really for people to know that they've got people within the firm who want to listen and help. You know, I'm a partner at Debenhams Ottaway. I do not want any member of my staff to be feeling ill, feeling that they can't cope, and feeling that they can't come to somebody who will help, because I know how I felt. And if people are feeling the way that I felt, then I would so hope that they would come to us. And so that's what we've done as a starting point. Obviously, we wouldn't just say, oh, well, that's it, we're in place. We're still sort of very much developing it, but hoping to, you know, disseminate information regularly, you know, give links to support groups, things like that. You know, reminding people that as part of our, you know, medical cash plans, you've got access to sort of counselling services and you know, private GPs and things like that. So really just trying to emphasize to people. And one of the things I was thinking about, just yesterday actually, was, you know, yes, we have you know, women who are likely to be going through this, but we also have young employees who live with their parents, and, you know, mum might be going through it. And so it's really important to educate people across the board, because I want the younger people to also know that if they're, you know, concerned about a situation at home or something like that, then there's somebody there who's able to help and provide them with knowledge and information.
Absolutely, and hats off to you all, because I think, you know, it's obviously it's very progressive, and a lot of the campaigning work we've been doing with the lovely Diane Danzybrink, who set up the Make Menopause Matter campaign in 2018. A lot of that is focusing on the three main campaign aims are basically addressing everything you and I have just discussed. So, you know, we need mandatory menopause training at medical school for all doctors, so that we're all getting that initial diagnosis straight off the bat. And then we need education in school, because as young people, we were never taught past, you know, we were always taught about how to not get pregnant, or how, you know, or giving birth. And then there was this sort of, that was it, you know. And so we you know, you're absolutely right that if we can educate women from much younger, so they know what to expect, especially with this perimenopause journey. And then the other obviously campaign aim is to have workplace support in place, which you guys are doing. And I think it all comes down to just having really open conversations, you know, like we were with mental health. Mental health is no longer a taboo, and I think, you know, making menopause not a taboo, breaking down those sort of stigma and barriers, including men in this conversation. And you know, I think it's fantastic you've got this insight, and I'm just sort of really talking to my members now, the Facebook group, that if you are having, you know, worries or problems in your own marriages, you know, before you do anything drastic, please do, you know, make sure your hormones are balanced, because it does impact on relationships. And make sure you're getting the right support from your doctor, or reach out to us for any information that you need, and we can sort of recommend things you can do, so that when, you know, if you're mentally and physically feeling better and then you still feel the same, well then fair enough, but it's just good to just ensure that this isn't an issue. I'm just going to ask Helen very quickly, if anyone in our Facebook group is watching now, if you want to ask any questions to Helen, please put it in the comment section below and I will ask for you. And if you'd rather ask anonymously, you're welcome to email me and I can obviously forward it on to Helen. Helen, just where can people, whilst I'm just watching the Facebook group, where can people find out more about you, obviously in Debenhams Ottaway, and the services you offer as a family?
Yeah, so I mean, Debenhams Ottaway, we're based in St Albans and Radlett. You know, if you go to our website, which is www.debenhamsottaway.co.uk, you've got my profile there. You've got my profile on the Latte Lounge, and I'm always happy. You know, my direct phone, my direct email are all there, and I'm always happy if somebody, you know, just has a question, they're not sure. I'm always happy to spend a bit of time, you know, just answering any initial query that you might have. I won't be able to give you, you know, the full answer, but just if you've got a little niggle or a question, I'm always happy to help.
Thank you so much, Helen. I've got a question just quickly, because we are running out of time, but I've got time for one question at least, and then I'll email you anything as they come in. But this lady's partner, well, her husband, they've looked at separating, and he's now gone to live in Spain because he's from Spain, and she's worried now that the no-fault divorce won't protect her, because is it just a UK law, or is it European wide?
Well, no, she could start the divorce process because she's living here, and therefore the court here has jurisdiction. And the way that the new system is working is that we're serving divorce papers both by email and then posting out copies. So I suppose she is going to need to know where he is in Spain, but no, that she would still be free to issue her proceedings. I suppose that then, you know, if he's gone and he doesn't want to engage, that's potentially a problem, because where we have somebody that, you know, doesn't want to engage, be it, you know, in this country or anywhere else, then we just have to make sure that we are complying with the rules of service of papers, to make sure that we can show that it has come to his attention. So, you know, maybe a little more involved, but certainly there's no bar to her initiating divorce proceedings.
Yeah, and I've got one more question, and then we must wrap up. And obviously, thank you for your valuable time. But this lady said she actually left her job, similar to my scenario, because she just couldn't cope with her menopause symptoms. And she's looking back now, sort of 2 years later, and feels very, very upset that she left her job with not knowing what's going on. Now, although she's now got treatment options, she's saying that the divorce, it actually split up the family, but because she was out of work for 2 years, it caused an enormous pressure on them, because he blamed her for leaving her job for no reason. He said that, well, she should have been able to cope with a job, you know, because her kids are all grown up. And she feels sort of very angry now that, you know, there was a whole financial implication. And I guess, you know, it's hard for women who are now, especially when they're listening to these conversations, they're realizing that perhaps, you know, the marriage could have been saved, and all the arguments about money, had she known. So, I mean, I guess in hindsight, you know, it's very sad, and for her, it's her partner, it's too late. But, you know, what would you say to women, sort of, if you could leave a sort of lasting tip? I guess, I mean, she'll need some possible counselling now, because I think she's still struggling, because she didn't want the marriage to break down. But yeah, maybe you could give us your sort of final word of advice.
I mean, I think that you know, that's sadly you know, a very difficult situation, because, as you say, if you've had a final settlement and it was 2 years ago, then you're extremely unlikely to be able to reopen that. And so I think it comes back to one of the points that we made at the beginning. It's about making sure that this is what you want to do. It's about making sure that you're not taking decisions where you're not in a position to do so, because unfortunately she does find herself somewhere where it's not going to be able to be unraveled. And you know, I think that is the best tip. It's just be very sure and take as much time as you need to make sure that this is right for you.
Absolutely. Well, look, Helen, thank you so much for giving up your valuable time today. And thank you everyone who joined to watch. If you do have any questions, I'm sorry that we've run out of time, but please email me, katie@lattelounge.co.uk. Any concerns you have to do with family law, and I'm very happy to pass them on to Helen Young at Debenhams Ottaway. So thanks everyone for joining, especially as I know it's your lunch hour and everyone's busy. But yeah, and again, thank you, Helen. And
thank you very much.
And we will, this is recorded, and we're going to save it, and it's going to be embedded in an article on our website and YouTube channel for everyone to watch back at their leisure, hopefully later on. So have a good day, everyone, and thanks again, Helen.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.